The Practical Tax Podcast with tax attorney Steve Moskowitz. The information contained in this podcast is based upon information available as of date of recording and will not be updated for any changes in law or regulation. Any information is not to be considered tax advice or legal advice and does not form an attorney-client relationship. Further, this podcast may be construed as attorney advertising. You should seek professional consultation for your individual tax and legal situation.
Welcome, everybody, to Practical Tax with tax attorney Steve Moskowitz. Steve, I want to ask you something before our first guest, because it kind of ties in with our guest. As you traveled around the country, did you constantly go back to the same hotel when you were in a city? Was it like one you favored and you just kind of stuck with it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. But what were the things that made, that drew you to that? Because I know that some hotels, they fight for business travel because that's a great thing to have. Others can't really compete in that area, and some do both.
Well, I hate to admit this, but my number one consideration was a good Wi-Fi. No, it's really important.
I get it, yeah.
So, I mean, for example, like right now we're doing a Zoom and, all the business is being done through the internet now. So the number one thing is I need a good Wi-Fi connection.
You know what mine was? Good pillows. Because I've always had, I played sports so many years and I'm feeling the pain now. So I always wanted a hotel that had good, firm pillows that, as opposed to the ones where they look like a sheep snuck in your room and it was on your bed. But, there was a lot of things. And it's funny. So I traveled forever and I would always pick the same hotels, and price didn't matter because that was 8 hours that I just could disappear, before I had to do any kind of work and everything. And that brings us,
you're only paying for part of the room. The IRS is paying for the other part.
Our first guest is the owner, and this is a family-owned business here in San Francisco that has been in this family since 1928, and some incredible stories. John Handlery joins us here from the Handlery Hotel in San Francisco. John, welcome to Practical Tax with Steve Moskowitz. Hope you're well.
I'm doing well. I hear you, Steve, on the radio quite often, giving tax tips. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Hopefully you heard me doing many broadcasts with Chip.
Yeah. Yes.
Both of you guys are great on the radio, and both of you guys, I think, are smart to represent your brand because, and that's one thing that I've seen all these years in radio is that people want authenticity. They don't need the guy that talks like this. Or what they want is they want to hear from the people who actually will be delivering the service or product that they have. And both of you guys represent yourselves real well. So there's some kissing up, but it's true.
Thanks, Chip.
Thank you very much.
So, John, let's talk about, obviously, since 1928, coming up on 100 years, not too far down the road.
But
you guys
John wasn't the one that opened the doors.
No.
Clear that up.
No. My grandfather, then my dad, now me, and two of my kids now have followed me into the industry. So, fourth generation.
Wow.
So let me ask you this, John. Over the years, obviously, this pandemic had to be a difficult period to get to, especially as I mentioned before with business travel down. How did you guys manage to get through that? And I know we're still kind of dealing with the after effects in the next few years. We'll be too, right?
Yeah, we're slowly coming back in San Francisco, which is positive. A lot of domestic visitors, people wanting to get out of the house and things of that nature. Conventions are obviously off because they usually book 3-4 years out. So people that were looking at a convention, say for 23 in 2020, they weren't going to book because we didn't know where we were going on this.
Right.
And so that's been the challenge. But the pandemic was totally different than at least anything I've ever experienced. I came back to work for my father in 1980, and I went through all the ups and downs in the downturn in the economy and things of that nature. But you could adjust to that by watching your costs and maybe playing around with the rate to try to entice someone. In April 3rd of 20, I ended up closing the hotel because we'd already been told 2 weeks earlier that you couldn't travel. And so that just changed everything.
And one of the things that's so tough about the hotel business is you can't save up inventory to sell later. You can't put that in the storeroom some places. I'll put this guest room in the storeroom and we'll sell it sometime
It's kind of like a restaurant, Steve. Right?
Exactly. Once the night is over, the room's gone. There's nothing you do to make up for that.
No, challenging. So there was really, And one of my children who I work with came to me and asked me about 3 months into it, when being closed, what would my dad have done? I said, I don't know if he would have done anything different, because if you're told you cannot travel, there's nothing I could have done. I can cut costs as I can, but I can't have the hotel open. So there's really, if you don't have guests, then you're going to lose money, but you'll lose less.
Well, you guys opened in the heart of the Great Depression in 1928, right? I mean, coming up, yeah. It's interesting to see this city and where it is, because obviously this is something you share with the other hotel owners, and I'm sure you guys talk, and and everybody's trying to figure out the near future. I agree with you, and I think Steve would agree, and probably sees it even more so, being a numbers guy, that it is changing. We are growing, but people don't realize, as you said, hotels book a couple of years out, and their convention stuff and convention business is huge. It is, I know that there are people, though, and this is one of the things you market to, and I love this, is that there's so many people that live in the Bay Area, and Steve, you live in the city, that don't come into the city. They say they're from San Francisco, but they can't tell you the last time they were in San Francisco, right? Yeah. And so that's a big part of your marketing too, right?
Yeah, it is. We're on the radio to attract that market, to try to get people come to the city, and just take a weekend off, if nothing else, or go see a Giants game or whatever the case may be. But and I think that's why it's been positive from a domestic standpoint, and especially regionally, where people who were locked up for whatever it was, a year plus, they do want to get out. They want to get away from their house, and so by letting them know that there's a lot of things in San Francisco maybe they hadn't seen.
And you know what's nice? If you stay in your hotel, you can walk to the restaurant, walk back, and if somebody should decide to imbibe an adult beverage, they don't have to worry about harming anybody.
Right. Well, and you're from that location, you're an Uber ride from Oracle or AT&T, or I forget what they're called now, the Presidio, the Wharf restaurants. When I was there staying at your place, and it's funny, who was a huge fan of your place? She's not here today. Liz Frame, who works with Steve. She loves it because she says she goes in there and she feels like she's gone back in time. I mean, all the amenities are modern, but it has the feel of a hotel that is part of the city. And it's really hard to explain that to people who've never been in there. But you both know what I'm talking about. You've been in hotels like that before. New York has a bunch of them. San Francisco, not so much. When I came, I stayed at a lot. I stayed at a bunch of different hotels in the city. And I didn't know. I've been in your hotel in San Diego. There's a Handlery in what do they call that? Hotel Circle down there. Yeah. But this one was such a great experience because, as Steve just mentioned, it was so close to stuff. I want to ask Steve, can I ask you a question about business travel? Because every year, like many people, I do a long form and I have a lot of travel expenses. Have you ever heard of an audit where they question your business travel and they say, well, did you go visit somebody? Did you have fun?
All the time. And that's actually one of the areas where the IRS is suspect. So the first thing they do is they take a look, what was the primary purpose of the trip? Was it business? And also one of the things they pay attention to is, where did you go? If you went to a resort area, that's going to get if you had a business trip or 2 weeks in Honolulu, that's going to be scrutinized in and of itself a lot more than if you had it in Pittsburgh or Detroit.
Interesting.
And then it's a whole bunch of things. And you have to show the primary purposes for business. On the other hand, suppose you were there for 2 weeks and you say you were doing business from Monday through Friday, and then you took the weekend off. Can you still deduct the time when you're off, Saturday and Sunday? The answer is yes, if you show that it wouldn't be practical to fly back to your home. It would make no sense for you to fly from San Francisco to New York on Saturday and then fly back Sunday. So you say, well, okay, it makes sense that I can go ahead and deduct my Saturday and Sunday expenses, even though I wasn't doing business then.
John, on a totally unrelated question, I got to ask you, a friend of mine owns a hotel in New Orleans, not big, has, I think 27 rooms, but I was talking to him about the strangest group he ever had come in on a business. And at the time he had a hotel that had 130 32 rooms, and he had a mime convention come in, and they filled they filled every room, and the entire hotel was full of mimes. What are some of the stranger groups you've had?
How'd they call for room service, Chip?
Yeah, nicely done.
Right? I don't know. Right? That'd be funny. That was a bad mime. I don't. So, does something jump to mind? It doesn't have to be on that. Just something unusual, or is anything jump to mind?
Not so much here in San Francisco, but I happened to be down at our property in San Diego when Comic-Con was in.
Oh, yeah.
And I was walking through our lobby, and everyone's dressed like Star Trek, or it was like Klingons, and I'm like, this is different. I'd never seen anything like it in my entire life. And they were all into it. I went, okay. But yeah, it was, that's about the wildest thing I think I've ever seen.
Do you get a sense moving forward that the city, obviously the city has some problems that the national media loves to focus on, although I don't think they're anywhere near as bad as they say. I mean, obviously shoplifting and homeless, but to me, it seems like that there is the one great thing about San Francisco is we don't try to solve the problems by just brushing it away. We try to get to the core of it and try to figure out, at least on a good day, that's who we are. When you talk to other businesses around you and other hotel owners, do you get a sense we're getting a hold on this and moving forward?
I think we are. 2020, when everything shut down, and if you were in Union Square, I mean, it was literally like, my God, am I the only person, in this city? And unfortunately, that brought an even more intense group of people we didn't want.
Right.
And so I guess it's good news and bad news is when the famous, we refer to it as the Louis Vuitton video, when all the element came in and hit a bunch of high-end retail stores. That seemed to wake up the city, I think primarily because it got national as well as international press. And so from that, so that was the bad news. The good news is the city now has brought back what I would call the old time beat cop, which is really all I think the businesses want, is just to see the regular gentleman you used to see back in the 70s and 80s walking by, how's everything, anything I need to know about. And that is refreshing. So
yeah.
If
I think that's great. That's like the old time New York beat cop. I mean,
yes,
there's
exactly.
nothing better.
Yeah.
Nothing better.
I was in Lower Pacific Heights, and I'm walking down the street, and a homeless man yelled to me, he goes, "Say, mister." So I turned around. He goes, "You dropped your wallet." I had a backpack. It had fallen out of my wallet.
Oh my God.
I had about $200 in cash sitting on a money clip. I tried to give him $20. He wouldn't take it. I mean, so that, I'm not going to say that's going to be your every experience, but it gave me I'm a big believer in, symbolic metaphors. And that was the last time I was there. So I think that there's something that I'll always treasure about San Francisco. And, the quality of your service in your hotel is
San Francisco is a great place, Chip.
Yeah.
So San Diego, but I love San Francisco.
Yeah.
As you know, I'm a New York City transplant, but I've been here for a long time.
Yeah. Well, I think there's more San Francisco in you now than New York City after all these years. Yeah. John, thank you so much, my friend. Please come back again and look forward to seeing you real soon. Okay.
Thank you very much, Steve. Nice.
Real pleasure. I'll look forward to seeing you in your hotel.
Thank you.
All right, take care.
Great property, great guy. The Handlery Hotel in Union Square. Steve, so I get the emails. I don't know why you don't get them, but I get emails from people to ask questions of you. And one is, I'm not going to say the person's name, but it's a fairly popular musician who knows that we do the show and had a question about receipts. Now, before I ask you the question,
keep them all forever.
Okay, all right. So I was audited in 1988, and I was audited, and I was a performer at the time, and so I brought in receipts, and a lot of them had faded, right? You couldn't really read them anymore, and the auditor seemed to trust me when I put down the amounts because I'd made the actual effort to keep these receipts. So my question for you is when you're, you're filing a long form and the receipts, are the receipts enough, or do you need to keep a diary to explain each one? Can you, I mean, because many times in an audit, you're a smart guy. You wouldn't let a person come in the audit. You would keep them out. Is a business diary a smart thing to have?
In a lot of areas, it's absolutely essential because the IRS looks for a lot of things. First, they look for the receipt. They look for the payment of the receipt. And they oftentimes are asking for the diary as well. So you have to record things. They want a lot of information. So the bottom line is defense is very different than planning. As far as planning, absolutely keep a diary of all your time, keep every receipt you have. And I wasn't kidding about how long to keep them, because if you look in the IRS instruction booklet, it tells you something different. It says, generally, you only have to keep your receipts for the time of statute of limitations, and generally that's 3 years. What they don't tell you is the 3 years is 3 years from the date you file the return. So if 10 years later they say you didn't file the return, they're going to allege that, hey, where's your receipts? And I have done plenty of cases like that where years later the government says, hey, you didn't file, prove it.
And if they see a pattern, they can start going backwards, right? To see if that pattern goes, how far it goes back, right? If you're
well, sure. And also the statute of limitations doesn't run until you file the return. So there's all kinds of things.
The last part of this question here, and I'm reading it as I speak, was about, so this particular performer, it's a woman, she says, oftentimes I'll lose a receipt, but I keep my credit card receipt and I have a diary. So I can show in the credit card receipt what I spent it for, and it's in my diary. Will that suffice in most cases?
Lawyer's answer. For planning, absolutely get the receipt, because the credit card only shows so much. Suppose, for example, I show the IRS I have a receipt from Costco for $100, and I say, "Oh, that was legal pads that I bought."
Yeah, right.
The IRS says, "Well, how do I know you didn't buy groceries?"
Right. Good stuff. Okay, that's it. Ask Tax Attorney. You can find all these by going to moskowitzllp.com. Okay, time now for our next guest, and this is, to me, there's all types of different consultants. You're a consultant in a way, right? I mean, you give practical advice based on numbers, kind of.
Tax.
Yeah, right. I think that one of the things that we've really seen in the last few years is consulting for people in their life and in different aspects of their life, not just how personal goes into business and business goes into personal. And especially if you have your own business, or maybe you have a W-2 and you have another business, being able to handle all that to me is pretty important. And our first guest, or second guest on the show today, you can find her at truthcoach.com. Kelly Accetta is nice enough to join us here on Practical Tax with Steve Moskowitz. Hi, Kelly.
Hello, gentlemen. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure.
So first of all, this is kind of a new phenomena, right? Coaching and coaching people through life. And I think in the beginning, there probably was some resistance.
Really, Chip? I mean, isn't all through history people have given advice to other people? Doesn't it go back thousands of years?
Without a doubt. No, I know, but I mean, I don't think thousands of years people have been listening to it.
Ask parents about their kids.
Exactly, right? So you work in probably the most important field in business, and I would say in our lives too, which is
tax,
communication, and taxes. Well, no, but that's true. I mean, you know this too, Steve, right? Everybody thinks taxes are zeros and ones, but there's a lot of gray area in there too about how to apply business acumen, tax acumen to a good life. I mean, it's right.
Look how often the courts split, and that's all courts,
right?
From the United States Supreme Court to the tax court having decisions saying yes in one area of the country, no in another area of the country. I mean, what is it? Law is, judges interpreting what the Congress meant, and they come up with all kinds of stuff.
Well, so Kelly, your website is called truthcoach.com. From that, can I infer that if a friend of yours says, "Does these pants make my butt look big?" you're going to say yes?
Yes, but not without permission.
But tell me, what's the biggest impediment today to good communication in business?
Well, I think, unfortunately, we've come to a place in our society where we're just so fragile. In my book, How to Diffuse the Landmines We Plant in Our Lives, one of my chapters is on offendability, is one of as a landmine. And we can see it in the cancel culture that's going on. We can see it, with the last presidential race, where friendships were ruined, lots of dinners, Thanksgiving and Christmas were ruined. Communication, unfortunately, is not in a healthy place. We used to be able to debate with one another and do so with respect and with honor. And if we didn't agree, it wasn't, I didn't want to throw you off a building or, make sure that you paid for it. It's really unfortunate where communication has gone. And that's another thing that I teach when I work with corporations is, we have to teach people how to take ownership of what triggers them. Because I don't know if a joke I might say to you, there could be history with you that's a trigger. And so you respond negatively. I can't know that. And I can't know the triggers for everyone in my organization or everyone on my team. And so I teach companies and I teach their employees how we need to take ownership of our own triggers and be forthright with people and say, hey, you might not realize this, but the way you said that or what you said really didn't sit well with me and got a lot of history. It's a trigger. It's my own thing, but please don't say that again, or don't, we have to be able to do that. We can't lay it at someone else's feet to know everything that triggers us.
I have a comment on that, Kelly. Amen. and the only thing I would say about the throwing off the roof is, but torture you first and then throw you off.
Yeah.
There you go.
Actually, I have some clients that I think could benefit from your counsel. Chip, if you'll send me the contact information, possibly I could refer somebody to you.
Well, by the way, we do always have the content for information for for all of our guests and us at the end of every show. So when you see the video of it, it's interesting. I used to write. I started out writing opinion pieces for nonprofits, and occasionally I would get asked to write a speech, and somebody would ask me, "Can you write a joke for the speech?" And I said, "Well, here's my rule: is that I'll write a joke, but you have to be the butt of your own joke." Because self-deprecation is the best way to ingratiate yourself with people, especially a person of authority, an important figure. If they can make fun, there's a way to do it. You don't want to affect your credibility, but you can make fun of the fact that you're, I had a guy, he said, I run marathons, all downhill though, right? Or, I'm a bad golfer, I'm the worst house husband in the world, but I'm trying to get better. And you tell a story, and people have a sense, they feel, that, okay, this person's like me, and it's to me with, communication, when I look at and I listen to people like Warren Buffett talk about his secretary, he talks about her in a warm and ingratiating way that makes you think, I want to work for this guy. And down the line, I want to work for the people that work for this guy. How can so many businesses and government officials miss these cues?
Well, first and foremost, it's the oldest problem since we opened our mouths, is unfortunately most of us are horrible listeners.
That's true.
Most of us take turns talking at one another. Most of the time when someone is talking to us, we're thinking about what we're going to say as opposed to really listening and asking questions to make sure we understand. There's so many times, oftentimes, when I'm in a conversation and someone that I'm speaking with thinks they know what I'm going to say, so they cut me off and they just go on a tangent, and it's 2 or 3 minutes later before I can finally get a word in edgewise and say, that's not what I was going to say. So listening is such a crucial part of communication. And also, when you're talking from a company standpoint or a corporate standpoint, you gentlemen deal with a lot of businesses. one of the things, a pitfall that I have seen just get worse with every year that passes, is that companies speak in acronyms. And it's really easy to shorten things, create acronyms, and your internal language becomes all acronyms. That is awful in two ways. First of all, when you have a new hire, they really, it takes a while for them to figure out what the heck people are talking about, because everyone is talking about the GPS going to the HCE and the NCR has to be perfect for the PSA, and it is mind-boggling when I'll go into companies and they're having issues with departments, and I'll look at a few emails and I'll say, well, does this department have any idea what any of these acronyms mean? or which ones are a priority? Or acronyms are also something. And then what happens is it bleeds into, first of all, interdepartmentally.
Can I jump in there real quick?
Sure.
Is it up to kind of the person when they're confused to just ask questions? I don't know what that means. Can you help me out? Right?
Yes, it is. But in the regard of, then it transfers, it bleeds into the marketing. It bleeds into campaigns. It bleeds into how companies go about positioning themselves. And I can't tell you how many, I know I'm weird, but I love watching commercials because I'm in communication.
Oh, yeah.
And so I love watching commercials to see how companies communicate. I can't tell you how often I've caught them actually using acronyms in their commercials.
Yeah. Well, Steve, can I ask you a question?
Oh, you can, but first I have some more amens for Kelly, because I listen to people all day as part of an attorney, and also I speak to people, but boy, people's attention spans have really shortened. And the problem is, and I even say to clients, good communication is so vitally important in every relationship, not just client and lawyer relationship, but personal relationships and every other type of relationship. And that has sorely, so not to mention people are afraid to talk to each other because you say God knows what, and then how dare you? Oh, and I'm going to sue you over that, and it's incredible. So what's happened is people cut down what they say, because they say, well, all right, maybe if I offend you, I just won't say anything, and that hurts the business, that hurts the relationship, because then some vital communication, or maybe there's something that needs to be fixed, and it's sort of like, if somebody would tell me that, I would take it as a favor. If somebody would say to me, Steve, the shirt you're wearing has a big spaghetti stain on it, I would really be grateful that you didn't let me go out and talk to all my clients with
or
a big
something from your
spaghetti stain on my
nose,
shirt.
hanging in your nose, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Or
your
Nikki.
teeth. Yeah.
But people are afraid to say anything. And I say, well, thank you for helping me. Thank you for caring enough about me to say, look, there's something that, maybe I can improve myself, because if you don't say it to my face, everybody else is going to say it to my back. And that could really hurt what I'm going to do in business. So you're really doing the person a favor, even if it's, something isn't in your tooth. Well, you know what? It's better to fix it.
Steve, how do you do that though? How do you deal with, like, somebody's in in a tax situation, and you have to explain complicated. I mean, it's what, 8,000 page tax code. I mean, how do you dumb that down?
Version.
What's that?
If you look at the abridged version.
Okay, right, yeah. I'm dumbed down is probably the wrong word, but how do you create a dialogue with somebody so they don't feel like they feel they're part of the process and they can understand it?
I've been very blessed, because I've spoken so much in my career, and also at the beginning of my career, I was a professor, and as you know, a TV and radio legal analyst. So basically what I have to do is, when I speak to somebody, to the best of my ability, I try to communicate in a meaningful way. It's like, if a physician is speaking to another physician about a medical condition, he or she is going to use terms way differently than if they're speaking to me. And basically what I try to do is just speak to somebody the way I would appreciate if they'd speak to me.
Gotcha. Kelly, so as a woman in this field, and there's still many glass ceilings, and you speak before corporations, probably predominantly men in many cases. How do you break through some of that prejudice with language, with tone, with I guess there's probably a lot of subtleties that we're not even aware of that we're probably doing now that you see. How do you break that in? Is this a better time than it was maybe 50 years ago for women? I'm hoping the answer is yes.
It is and it isn't. One thing that's starting to happen is that companies are recognizing that 45% of most companies now are female. And so there's a lot of companies that are trying to bring up and develop and groom leaders that are female, because I always explain it as a yin and yang. Men are great at certain aspects, and women are great at other aspects. And when you can find a company that has a solid leadership team that is a mix of ethnicities and of genders, you are going to have so much meat when you have a conversation. The problem is a lot of times, and they keep doing studies and keep doing studies. You can see these studies every year. They come out with different studies of how they'll I know Google was having an issue about 8 years ago. They really went after trying to get women into leadership roles, and all the science is in a book, fabulous book called That's What She Said. They did all this research, and they showed that they would submit 2 resumes, exact resumes, and they would just change the name. One had a female name, one had a male name. The male name was chosen 80% of the time over the female name.
Yeah.
Then they would go one step further and they would submit code. It was kind of like, here, solve this problem, show how you solve this problem, and that will be a part of your, whether or not you're going to hire this person. And they did the same thing, and they did blindly. They submitted the code, and women's code was chosen much higher. I believe it was 65% of the time, 70% of the time over the men. But then when submitted with their names on it, female names,
Kelly,
they were not. So it's
one of the
it's
things
a
I
challenge.
mentioned to the companies is consider the consumers. I think
Exactly.
women make up more consumers than men. So if I was the owner of that company, I would be really, really concerned is what is of interest to my potential customer or client.
Exactly.
And, possibly a woman knows what a woman might find attractive in any product more than a guy would. I don't know.
Amen.
Well-
And it's actually, I believe we are 80% of the financial decisions of the home are on the woman's shoulder.
99 in my home.
Well, I find that a lot when I talk with clients. If I don't talk to the couple together, the husband will say, I've got to ask my wife.
Wow. I tell this all the time. I was raised by 5 women, single mom and 4 older sisters. And I learned, I learned things that I could never learn from men, about, and subtle things too. And that was the best part. Truthcoach.com. What's the book again?
How to Diffuse the Landmines We Plant in Our Lives.
All right. And you can find that at truthcoach.com, right?
And Amazon, yes.
All right. And Amazon, of course, right. Kelly, will you come back, please?
I would love to.
A lot of
Thank you
great
for
stuff,
having
Kelly.
me.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. Again, that's Kelly Accetta, truthcoach.com. That's another edition of Practical Tax with Steve Moskowitz. I'm Chip Franklin. You guys be well. Until next time.
The Practical Tax Podcast with tax attorney Steve Moskowitz.